What if I told you that the mental file cabinet in your brain labeled facts is actually stuffed with historical fan fiction? We've all sat through history classes where we nodded along to stories of cake-eating queens, horned barbarians, and geniuses failing basic math. But here's the cold, hard truth. History isn't just written by the winners. It's written by the people with the best PR teams. From the ancient Roman streets to the American colonies, our collective memory is lousy with persistent, high-definition lies. Today, we are hammering through the past and performing a total purge. We're exposing the 10 biggest historical fake facts that everyone, including your teachers, just believed. Get ready to realize your whole life has been a carefully crafted deception. Let's start the audit. Number 1. The cake scandal of Marie Antoinette. Let's start with the undisputed heavyweight champion of royal insults. The scene is 18th century France. The peasants are starving, they have no bread, and the cold, diamond-dripping queen Marie Antoinette sneers, "Let them eat cake." It's the ultimate proof of royal indifference, the smoking gun that justifies the guillotine. She never said it, not even close. The phrase "qu'ils mangent de la brioche" appeared in the writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau when Marie Antoinette was only 9 years old and still living in Austria. Rousseau attributed the quote to an unnamed great princess. In reality, Marie Antoinette was actually quite sensitive to the plight of the poor, often writing to her family about the necessity of helping the hungry. So why does the lie stick? Because the French revolutionaries needed a villain. They needed to paint the foreign Austrian woman as a monster to fuel the fires of the revolution. It was the 1700s version of a character assassination that worked so well it outlasted the Queen's own head. Number 2. The myth of the horned Viking. When you picture a Viking, you see a bearded, axe-wielding giant wearing a magnificent helmet adorned with massive, intimidating bull horns. It's the look that has defined every movie, sports team, and Halloween costume for a century. This is 100% theatrical fantasy. Despite thousands of archaeological digs and the discovery of countless Viking burial sites, we have found exactly 0 authentic Viking helmets with horns. Think about it from a practical standpoint. If you're in a shield wall in a cramped, bloody battle, the last thing you want are 2 massive handles on your head that an enemy can grab to snap your neck or knock your helmet off. Vikings were pragmatic warriors. They wore simple, functional, conical iron helmets. Where did the horns come from? The imagination of Carl Emil Doppler, a costume designer for an 1876 production of Richard Wagner's opera cycle. He wanted the villains to look more primal and beast-like. The look was so cool that we collectively decided to ignore the archaeology in favor of the aesthetic. Number 3. George Washington's wooden teeth. We've all heard the story of the father of the United States suffering through his presidency with a crude, splintery set of dentures carved from cherry wood. It's meant to show his rugged, humble character. His teeth were a high-tech, for the time, horror show, but they weren't wood. Washington suffered from horrific dental issues his entire life, but a man of his wealth wouldn't settle for lumber in his mouth. His dentures were actually a complex, painful construction of gold, ivory, lead, and most disturbingly, real human teeth. Some of these teeth were harvested from animals, but many were purchased from enslaved people. The wood myth likely started because the organic materials in his dentures, the bone and ivory, would stain dark brown over time from his love of port wine and tobacco. To an observer, they looked like grain-heavy wood. The wooden teeth story is a convenient way for history books to avoid the much darker reality of where those teeth actually came from. Number 4. The Salem witch bonfires. When we think of the 1692 Salem witch trials, we see a dark Puritan town with women tied to wooden stakes while orange flames lick at their feet. It's the classic imagery of burning a witch. Not a single person was burned at the stake in Salem. In the American colonies, which were under English common law, the penalty for witchcraft was death by hanging, not burning. Of the 20 people executed during the hysteria, 19 were taken to Gallows Hill and hung by the neck. The 20th person, Giles Corey, was famously pressed to death with heavy stones because he refused to enter a plea. The burning witch image is a carryover from European history and the Spanish Inquisition, where heresy was often punished by fire. In Salem, it was a rope, a cold hill, and a legal system that had completely lost its mind. No matches required. Number 5. Columbus and the Flat Earth Theory. The story goes that in 1492, Christopher Columbus had to fight against a world of ignorant, flat earth-believing church officials to prove that the world was a sphere. He was the lone visionary who knew you wouldn't fall off the edge. Everyone who mattered already knew the earth was round. Educated people, the church, and the scientific community had known the earth was a sphere since the time of the ancient Greeks, specifically Eratosthenes, who even calculated the circumference. The debate wasn't about the shape of the earth, it was about the size. Columbus's critics were actually the ones who were right. They argued that the earth was much larger than Columbus thought, and that he would starve to death before he ever reached Asia. Columbus was actually a terrible mathematician who got his numbers wrong. He didn't set out to prove the earth was round. He set out on a suicide mission based on bad math and only survived because he accidentally bumped into a continent no one in Europe knew was there. Number 6. Albert Einstein, the math failure. This is the ultimate comforting myth told to every student who struggles with a calculus test. Don't worry, even Albert Einstein failed math in school. It's the perfect underdog story. He was a mathematical prodigy who mastered calculus by age 15. The failure myth actually comes from a simple misunderstanding of the Swiss grading system. In 1895, Einstein's school flipped their grading scale. A 1 used to be the best grade and a 6 the worst. They reversed it so that 6 became the top mark. When biographers looked back at his records and saw a 1, they thought he was failing, when in reality, he was at the absolute top of his class. Einstein himself laughed when he heard this myth, saying, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." He wasn't struggling, he was just bored because the curriculum couldn't keep up with his brain. Number 7. Nero fiddling while Rome burned. The iconic image of Emperor Nero shows him standing on a balcony, dressed in fine robes, playing a fiddle and singing while his city is consumed by the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. It's the ultimate symbol of a detached, psychotic tyrant. He didn't fiddle, and he wasn't even there. First of all, the fiddle wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. If he played anything, it would have been a cithara, a type of lyre. But more importantly, the historian Tacitus, who was actually alive at the time, noted that Nero was 35 miles away in Antium when the fire started. When he heard the news, he rushed back to Rome and spent his own money organizing massive relief efforts. He even opened his private gardens to house the homeless and brought in food supplies to prevent a famine. The fiddling story was political propaganda, spread by later historians and rivals who wanted to ensure Nero was remembered as a villain to justify the new regime. Number 8. The gross truth about vomitoriums. We've all heard about the decadence of ancient Rome, how they would feast until they were full, then retreat to a special room called a vomitorium to purge their stomachs so they could go back and eat more. It's the peak of Roman excess. A vomitorium has nothing to do with puking. In Roman architecture, a vomitorium is simply a massive arched corridor or entranceway in a stadium or theater. They were designed to allow thousands of people to enter and exit a building incredibly fast. The name comes from the Latin word vomere, which means to spew forth, not in the sense of food, but in the sense of crowds pouring out of a building. If you've ever walked through the large tunnels to get to your seats at a modern football stadium, you were standing in a vomitorium. There were no bowls, no feathers, and no intentional purging, just really efficient urban planning. Number 9. The 30-year-old Middle Ages.
We are told that in the Middle Ages, the average life expectancy was about 30 years old. This leads us to believe that everyone was walking around with gray hair and canes at age 25 and dropping dead of old age at 30. If you survived childhood, you were likely to live a long life. This is a classic case of statistical distortion. The average was dragged down to 30 because the infant mortality rate was astronomical. If half the population dies at age 1 and the other half lives to age 70, the average age is 35. That doesn't mean anyone actually died at 35. In reality, once a medieval person made it past the age of 21, their chances of living to 60 or 70 were actually quite high. We picture a world of teenagers, but the reality was a world full of grandparents. They just had to survive the glitchy first 5 years of life to get there. Number 10. The John Smith and Pocahontas romance. The Disney version, and even many history books, tells a story of a brave Captain John Smith about to be executed by the Powhatan tribe, only for the beautiful Princess Pocahontas to throw herself over him, saving his life and starting a legendary romance. The rescue was likely a ritual, and the romance was non-existent. Pocahontas was about 10 or 11 years old when she met John Smith, who was a 27-year-old soldier of fortune. There was no romance. Furthermore, Smith's execution story is highly suspect. He wrote 2 different accounts of his time with the tribe, and the dramatic rescue only appeared in the second version, written years later when Pocahontas had become a celebrity in London. Most historians believe that if the event happened at all, it was a mock execution ritual, a way of symbolically killing Smith as an outsider and rebirthing him as a member of the tribe. Smith wasn't a hero being saved by love. He was a participant in a cultural ceremony that he completely misunderstood or intentionally sensationalized to sell more books. History isn't just a record of what happened, it's a record of the stories we chose to keep. Which of these facts did you believe until today? Did the vomitorium truth ruin your image of Roman parties, or are you still mourning the loss of the Viking horns? Expose the baloney in the comments. If you have a historical myth that deserves to be number 11, let me know. Smash that subscribe button to keep your brain's file cabinet updated with the truth. And don't forget to like this video if you're ready to start the purge. See you in the next deep dive.